There's a lot of talk around this concept of clean core in digital transformations and ERP upgrades, but I'm here to share some bad news with you. Clean core is a hoax. I'm going to share why here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And over the last 25 years of helping clients through their digital transformations, I've seen a lot of buzzwords, a lot of concepts, a lot of schools of thought change and evolve, all in this quest to try and solve the ever unsolvable mystery of how to avoid digital transformation failure and how to mitigate the massive risks of digital transformations. After all, with an 80% plus failure rate that has been very consistent and steady over the years, we have to wonder, why are these projects still failing? And so what a lot of software vendors and system integrators do is they try a bunch of stuff, experiment with a bunch of stuff, throw spaghetti at the wall, and hope that something eventually sticks in the quest to improve the success rates of digital transformations. The latest entry into that playbook is this concept called clean core. And this is an idea that sounds good in theory, but in reality, it is a terrible idea with very significant risks that, in my opinion, can outweigh the potential benefits. And that's what I'm going to dive into here today. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how to make your digital transformation successful, be sure to download our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. This book contains 20 different lessons that we've gotten from having helped over 1,000 different organizations so far in their digital transformation journeys over the years. And you can find that book by scanning the QR code right here, and you can also find them in the links below. First, let's talk about clean core and the background of how we got here. First of all, let's look at the name clean core. Just to give some initial context, clean core is the concept of not customizing the core ERP software. And if you do need to customize the software or the functionality that might be limited within that software, you do it outside the system. You do it through extensions, you do it with other apps that then integrate back to the clean core so that upgrades can be easier and they're not corrupting the way that the software is built. Sounds innocent enough, sounds good enough, it sounds reasonable enough. Now, the reason this isn't so reasonable or hasn't always been reasonable historically is because ERP systems, just like any technology, has limitations. No matter what system you go out there and buy today, you're not going to find a system that meets 100% of what you need to run your business. So you're going to have to change some things. So then the big debate comes, well, do we change things to fit our business, or do we change our business to fit the software, to make software easier, even though it's going to water down or undermine our business efficiency? And that's a debate that I don't think we'll solve anytime soon. It really is a technical versus business debate. And I suppose it depends on who's holding the purse strings or whoever has the most influence within your organization on who's going to win that battle within your organization. But regardless, most organizations, if not all organizations we've worked with over the years, end up having to customize something with any ERP system that's being deployed. Not because they're bad systems, not because they're severely lacking in functionality, although some of them are, but in most cases, they're decent systems. They have decent capabilities, but every company's different. Every company has unique advantages. Every company has unique products, unique geographies they operate in, and it's just simply impossible for one ERP system to be everything to everyone. So this is where the word customization comes into play. This is where organizations over the last few decades have decided to go ahead and customize the software to fit their business. Again, that sounds reasonable enough on the surface until it comes time to upgrade the software, or until the software becomes obsolete and there's no one around to maintain that software in the custom code that's been developed there. The upgrades become a lot more complicated. The upgrades oftentimes break the customization. So when you do upgrade the software, you end up losing that customization, or worse yet, you upgrade the software and that customization breaks and you can't run your business the way you could before the upgrade. Or another option is you just don't upgrade. You just stay on the old system because you customize all this stuff and it's too hard to upgrade to the newer system. So this is where the concept of clean core comes in. I believe it was SAP who came up with the concept of clean core, although Oracle and other vendors out there are now using the same term. And this is the vendor's answer to solve that technical mystery of how do we get people just to adopt best practices. Software vendors came up with this concept of industry best practices years ago as a way to sell their software as a sort of silver bullet. Like, hey, we know your industry. We have pre-configured best practices. We know how your business should run. We know your industry. Sounds great in theory until you look at those best practices and realize they're not best practices. That's just the way the software was built. And even if it is best practice for someone, it may not be and probably is not best practice for you. So now we've got ourselves a problem, because if you're not buying the concept of industry best practices, then you're left with the other option, which is to customize the software, which leads to all the problems I just mentioned a moment ago. And this is a real problem in today's day and age because so many vendors are trying to move customers to the cloud. On-premise was okay, I suppose, to have some customization because they would sell the software and then just make the money up front and then just have a small ongoing maintenance fee every year that they'd make off their customers. Now, however, they really need you to go to the cloud because they need you to be committed to a monthly or an annual subscription fee that never goes away, never decreases, and actually increases over time. So they really, really want you to get to the cloud. So the way they're going to try and convince you to do that now is to say, go with a clean core, don't customize anything, don't bring over your old legacy customization, just use the software the way it was built. And this is a way of vendors acknowledging that they need that to scale. They are trying to scale their software to as many organizations and users as possible throughout the world, which is their prerogative. They're out there to make money. That's fine. But that massive amount of scale can only go so far, and it's actually creating a lot of tension with clients to where they can't make that software work or find a way to get that software to work in their current environment. So they come up with this concept called clean core, and notice the word clean. Clean suggests that clean is good. If it's not clean, then it must be dirty. And so we don't want dirty, we want clean. So there's a very strong psychological aspect to the naming of that. It's a brilliant name, but unfortunately it's not very effective, and that's what I'm going to dive into next. Before I dive into some of the dark side of clean core, let's talk about the benefits of clean core. I've alluded to these a moment ago. The first is that if you go with a clean core and you don't customize the software when you deploy it, and if you do customize, you're doing it outside the system through third-party apps and then integrating back to the clean core. If you do that, then it does a couple things. One is it makes the ongoing upgrade process, especially in a cloud environment, much easier, because now there's a lot less to break. You didn't customize stuff that could get broken in the upgrade process. Now the vendors have free reign to do whatever they want, and they don't have to worry about breaking any customization. Now, vendors will tell you this is a good thing because they want to innovate and they want to keep creating new stuff. They want to create all these AI agents that they can eventually charge you more for, by the way. They can introduce new capabilities that they'll eventually charge you more for. So they really want you to stay current on the most recent version of the software. Not even necessarily because it's best for you as an organization, but because that gives them more control and it gives them the ability to innovate in whatever way they want. And oftentimes that's positive innovation. In other cases, it's not. It's going to create misalignment between the technology and the business, but that's a conversation for another day. The other advantage of clean core is it does force you and challenge you to think about what do we really need to customize versus what shouldn't we customize. And I would say this is more of a alignment and a program governance issue that doesn't necessarily need to be solved by forcing technology in place to replace that need. Instead, what organizations should have been doing all along, and this goes way before the cloud, I'd say 10, 20, 30 years ago, organizations should have been more deliberate and diligent about minimizing customization. It's not reasonable to say you're not going to do any, because most organizations, I'd say overwhelming majority of organizations we work with, end up having to customize something because they have such unique competitive advantages. Now, many technologists out there will tell you you're not that different, every company's the same, you're in the same industry as hundreds of other organizations, you look just like everyone else, but you don't. If every organization in your industry looked the same, you wouldn't have the competitive advantages you do, and your competitors wouldn't have their advantages either. If they all use clean core just as it was built, you'd all look the same and you'd have no advantage, and that's just not realistic. So reducing customization is a noble goal, but it's not something we need a clean core to necessarily accomplish. Just remember that the real benefit, though, of clean core is for the vendors, because the more they can get more companies like yours onto the clean core, the more profitable they are, the more free reign they have to completely change the software whenever they need to, and they can scale it in a multi-tenant environment much better with a clean core. So I've talked about some of the advantages of clean core, but what are the dark sides? What are the negatives? Well, what it does is it does make the jobs of your technology team easier in many cases, because now they have less to maintain, there's less customization to worry about, there's less to untangle. But what it does is now it shifts a ton of pressure onto your business. And now your business is forced to choose between adopting clean core, which in many cases is going to be a complete misfit with what your needs are. There are going to be areas where it does fit well and you don't need to change anything and clean core is fine. But it's that small minority percentage of stuff that doesn't fit within the clean core, it doesn't fit your business. That's the stuff that will disrupt an entire project. It's the stuff that will disrupt your entire operations. And it's the stuff that will completely, potentially outweigh the advantages of clean core. And the reason for that is because so many organizations are not able to leverage software the way it was built. And that's understandable because every organization is different. So now we've shifted the risk from a technology risk to now a business risk. And I would submit to you that the business risk, if you were to quantify it, is much greater than the risk of some of your IT staff being unhappy with the fact that they have to maintain more customization, or your vendor being unhappy because now it's harder to do upgrades on the technology side. I would submit to you that it could be that the business value of going outside the clean core is great enough that you're willing to take on that technological risk. And I can almost assure you that there will be situations where that's true for your organization. It's just a matter of how many situations like that are you going to have in your company and your project. Not only is this a business operations challenge, but now it's a change management and user adoption challenge. So clean core challenges businesses and people to change and forces them to change at an even greater magnitude than they had already in the past. And keep in mind, the technology is changing exponentially. So the chasm between the way organizations are today and the way technology works in the future is just growing. So already, no matter what we do, change management is becoming increasingly challenging for organizations. Now you throw in this concept of clean core, which essentially says we can't change the software and we're not willing to change the software in a material way to fit our business. Now you're putting not only operational risk out there, but now you've got organizational and user adoption risk as well. So those are very significant risks that get understated. They're not talked about much when people talk about clean core, but it's a very real risk that everyone should be aware of. So let's look at the big picture. What does this mean, bigger picture? Well, a few things here, and I don't want to sound too draconian or dystopian here, but really what this is doing is it is shifting the power, the balance of power from you and your operational needs and how you want to run your business to the vendors. They have more control over your operations, for better or for worse. They have more control over your data. They have more control over what your operations are going to look like 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now. They have more control over what your IT spend is going to be, which, spoiler alert, it's going to increase over time, and it's probably going to increase a lot more than you'd like it to. So if you're concerned about operating expenditures, be aware of that. Your capital expenditure might go down, but your OpEx spending is about to balloon over the next several years. So that's one thing to be aware of from the bigger picture, is that your control is being ceded to the vendors in many ways. The other factor here is, what about your competitive differentiators? I would ask you to list out what your top 3 differentiators are and those sort of showstoppers, the things that you're not willing to compromise on because it's so important to your business. Now, I'm not talking about being important to your business because people just like it that way or they're comfortable with it. I'm talking about the market's demanding it, your customers demand it, you're beating your customers in this way. Those are the things you have to ask yourself, are you going to get that from any off-the-shelf software using clean core? Probably not. And when you find out you can't get that from clean core, what are you going to do? And that's where the chinks in the armor start to get exposed in this concept of clean core. The other thing to think about, and this is a big one that I haven't seen anyone talk about yet, is we treat clean core as this concept of being future-proof and getting rid of technical debt, and this is going to solve all of our problems for the future. But let's use SAP for an example. You've got S/4HANA as the core ERP system, and you've got Fiori as the app development platform that you can use to create apps to integrate back to the clean core. What happens when S/4HANA and or Fiori become obsolete and SAP decides we're moving on to the next thing? Well, you're still stuck in the same situation because all that work you did to move to clean core now is just getting ripped out and potentially replaced in the future with whatever the next big thing is. So that's something I don't have a good answer for. I don't know with 100% certainty that that's going to happen, but it seems pretty likely given the fact that every 10 to 15 years the vendors go through some major overhauls of their systems. You have to wonder what's going to happen in the 2030s when S/4HANA is completely obsolete. What are we going to do then? So We're going through all this heartache, all this pain for limited short-term to intermediate gain, and you have to ask yourself, is that worth it when you know that you're probably gonna have to make some changes in the future? So this begs the question, if we don't do 100% clean core, then what do we do? If we don't listen to SAP and the other big vendors and go clean core, what do we do? Well, there's a lot of different options. One is you can move to a best of breed model. We're seeing a lot of companies do this now. A lot of our clients are going best of breed. They might have ECC, which is an older version of SAP in place, and they're actually shrinking the footprint of ECC and bolting on other third-party applications, especially now in this world of Boomi and other platform as a service and integration tools. It makes it a lot easier to integrate systems across SAP and other non-SAP, other ERP platforms. We're also seeing a lot of clients that are refusing to double down and go all in on cloud first. And they're saying, hey, what if we take more of a hybrid approach of a mixture of on-prem and cloud and or private cloud? And that's really important because private cloud gives you a bit of the best of both worlds where you can still have someone else managing your infrastructure, but you can still make customizations to the software in a way you may not be able to in a public cloud or software as a service type of environment. So these are some of the options you have, and there's other options as well that I'd be happy to explore with you if you'd like to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below if you'd like to talk about this clean core concept in more detail. And I'd also love to hear from you. If you have experience with clean core as a customer or you're trying to implement a clean core, tell me what your feedback is. I'd love to hear the pros and the cons, the results you're seeing so far. Please leave the comment in the field below. I'd love to hear from you. And again, as always, if you'd like to learn more about how to make your project successful, be sure to read our Lessons from 1000 Digital Transformations ebook. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and have a great day.